And yes, we do have quorum. I would like to get started. Welcome everyone to this board meeting. We meet this evening from many locations in the traditional unceded and unsurrendered territories of the Algonquin peoples, on lands recently ravaged by a destructive storm that broke and uprooted trees, damaged homes and habitats, and disrupted many lives. We thank the Algonquin Nation for hosting us on their land, and we commit to helping to recreate safe spaces for all living creatures in our communities as part of our shared stewardship, recognizing that the effect of the storm has altered the land itself with changed circumstances for all of its inhabitants. Calling the meeting to order then, I am looking for a motion to approve the agenda. Do we have a mover for the agenda?
I'll move it.
I'm sorry, who was that?
Lyra.
Thank you, Trustee Lyra. And as that seconder for that motion?
Trustee Jenkins.
Thank you, Trustee Jenkins will second. Is there any discussion on the motion to approve the agenda? Seeing none, then I will call the question on the agenda as presented. All those in favor? And those opposed? And the agenda is carried. Moving on then, the next item on our agenda is delegations. And this evening, I'm pleased to welcome Mr. Tim Abrey regarding the mask mandate. Mr. Abrey, are you here? Yes, I see you now. Thank you. You have 2 minutes for your presentation. After that, it may be followed by up to 3 questions for clarification from members of the board. And if necessary, we will also provide a staff comment or response to any questions. So when you are ready, please go ahead.
I'm sorry, were you speaking to me?
Yes, I was.
Thank you. Sorry about that. It's just when you join from the live stream, you join behind, so you don't actually hear your own introduction. So it's a little challenging that way.
I'm sorry about that. Do you need me to repeat anything?
No. Just as no, not at all. Totally clear. All right. Well, thank you very much. Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this evening. My name is Tim Abrey. I'm a parent, community member, communications consultant, and an academic who studies democratic systems. I'm here to address the recent far too hasty decision to remove the mask mandate from our schools. I've only got 2 minutes, so here's the bottom line. The director's unilateral decision to remove the mask mandate in schools blatantly disrespects the considered decision of this democratically elected body. And the director's communication of the shift in policy was dangerously misleading, giving parents, teachers, and community members no time to react or provide feedback. When you, the trustees of the board, passed your motion on April 12th, you did the right thing. You acted cautiously and prudently to protect the health and safety of students, teachers, and staff. You committed to leave the mandate in place until there was clear evidence that justified removing it. The director's communication on Friday implied that the threshold had been reached. She hastily announced the change, giving less than a day's notice. No time for consultation with trustees, no time for parents and community members to express their concerns or reservations. Overturning the decision of a democratically elected body with so little regard for the people they represent is bad enough. But now we know that OPH, Ottawa Public Health, has not in fact, adjusted its stance on masking. It announced on Sunday that it is maintaining its strong recommendation that indoor masking be maintained. So there has been no change in their stance. So why the change in schools? The bottom line is, with only 4 weeks remaining in the school year, there should be no change. The policy has worked. It continues to work. If you're approaching a stop sign, do you lift your foot off the brake and speed through the intersection? No, you don't. That would be reckless. And so is this sudden policy change. Reckless and foolish. I'm asking the Board of Trustees to keep its foot firmly on the COVID brake and reconfirm its April 12th decision. Please order the reinstatement of the mandatory masking policy immediately. Thank you very much.
And thank you for your presentation. Are there any questions for clarification from trustees? And I'm not seeing any. I will say that the motion that was previously.
There are several hands.
I'm seeing hands.
I'm not seeing any hands here at all. Let me
I
just
see
go back.
Lyra and I see
Okay,
Justine.
I see trustee Lyra and trustee Bell.
So this is very critical of the staff position or the staff's decision. I'd like to hear from the director.
We will hear from the director afterwards, trustee Lyra. If you have a question for clarification of the delegate, that is what we are dealing with now.
Okay.
Trustee Bell.
Thank you for your delegation, Mr. Avery. I'm wondering, with your background studying governance systems, what in fact your recommended approach going forward would be, and further to that, what type of message that sends to the community with regard to our decision making around masks. So again, what sort of decision or process would you see going forward in your view that would support democracy? And then the second is how best to communicate with the public. Thank you.
I appreciate the question, and I'll keep it succinct. I think I summarized it as quickly as I could in my presentation, which is this was a decision of a democratically elected body. There was a provision in the motion that allowed staff to come forward with a change to the policy if the conditions changed. But it's clear that the conditions have not, in fact, materially changed. If the staff wish to make a change to a decision that was made by democratically elected people, they need to return that decision to that same body and ask them to revisit it, not simply make the decision unilaterally without any room for discussion or conversation. And I think that that's the concern. In terms of communicating it, at a bare minimum, if, for example, the board had approved of this and the board agreed that it was time to proceed and go ahead despite, throw caution to the wind and go for it, at a bare minimum, this should have been communicated with time for parents to make decisions for their kids in their own best interest. And that was not provided. A couple of days over the weekend is not sufficient. And I think that it's deeply disrespectful of the people in the community at a bare minimum not to give them at least a few days to sort themselves out and decide whether they want to continue with this.
Thank you, Mr. Abre. Are there any other questions for clarification? Seeing none, then it was my intention to ask the director for comment and also to note that in the motion that the board approved, there was no indication there that the decision to remove the mask mandate would have to come back to the board in the language of the motion itself. Madam Director, would you care to comment?
Thank you, through you, Chair. I will ask Eddie Reynolds to make a comment pertaining to the Ottawa Public Health Statement, given that Eddie Reynolds does sit at those tables, and Executive Officer Giroux will comment around the procedural piece, as her role is deeply steeped in the processes of board motions and how it is to advise on the decision making there around that. So over to you, Eddie Reynolds, first on the OPH piece.
Thank you. From my recollection, one of the motivators for the motion from the board were comments that had been made by the medical officer of health during a peak portion of the most recent surge, a comment that was made to the media. Since then, we've been in constant communication with OPH. They indicated right from the beginning that they would not be comfortable providing clear direction to districts to end such a mandate, just as they had not provided a clear recommendation to institute such a mandate. They did, however, keep us up to date on what was happening in the community and reported to us on May 20th that the wastewater bar levels are decreasing, bringing them back to much more stable levels. Testing percent positivity was dropping as well, along with new hospital admissions or new confirmed outbreaks were also low and decreasing. So they provided several indicators to suggest that the surge was in fact coming to an end, and that circumstances were different from what they were when the medical officer of health made those comments. And based on that information, we followed through with a recommendation to remove the masking mandate at this time.
And with your indulgence, Chair, if I could ask Executive Officer Giroux to comment on the process pertaining to the board motion.
And sorry, just before the executive officer speaks, I'd like to remind every parent that they, of course, can have their child wear a mask at school, and they will be more than welcome to do so. And if a mask needs to be provided, we can do so at the school level as well. Just sorry, last little reminder I wanted to slip in there.
Executive Officer.
Through you, Madam Chair, from a procedural perspective, this motion had a condition that signaled the end of the motion, and that condition didn't indicate that it had to return to the board, but rather that we needed, what the board asked for was the explicit guidance or direction from Ottawa Public Health. As the Associate Director indicated, we meet regularly with Ottawa Public Health, and right from the passing of the motion, we talked about the board's request for that clause. And it was pretty clear in our conversations that with Ottawa Public Health, we would continue to receive their advice and guidance and monitor COVID trends and data, but that it was unlikely that they would issue anything explicit to the board that removed the condition. But what they did do was provide a letter to us confirming that in fact those levels had changed and that the circumstances were different. And after many, many weeks of monitoring, that's where we felt the conditions had been met. And so while many motions might have to go back to the board to be rescinded, the structure of this motion we did not believe did require that. And the last thing I would say is in the messaging from Public Health, they have always maintained that masking is recommended in indoor spaces and that people make a personal decision on that. And that position and the information that they issued last week is consistent with what they said when the board passed this motion, with the exception that they were more explicit about mask recommendations in schools at the time of the passage of the motion, but not as explicit about that at this time. So that's where we're at procedurally and our interpretation of the work we've been doing with Public Health that got us to making the recommendation.
Thank you, Director, Associate Director, and Executive Officer. Mr. Avery, I do see your hand is up. However, we have reached the end of the time for delegations. It is not a debate. And so I would like to thank you again for bringing this matter forward to our attention. And you may feel free to join the live stream again for the remainder of the meeting. There may be some further discussion of this when we receive the COVID update. Moving on then with our agenda, our next item is a presentation from the Indigenous Education Council, and I would like to welcome Monique Manach for that presentation this evening. Thank you for being here tonight.
Miigwech. Thank you. And Pajashit, welcome. Welcome to unceded, unsurrendered Algonquin territory. Monique Manach and Dishnikos, Kittiganik and Ishnabek and Dojaba. My name is Monique Manach and I'm a member of the Algonquin to Barrier Lake. I'm also the chair for the Indigenous Education Council. And this year for the report, we would like to talk about various events, appointments, consultations, and reviews that have occurred. We would also like to just bring to your attention and report to you about the Indigenous Education Council, the IAC, focusing on several issues, including the development of relationship with the Board of Trustees. This relationship building included moving from one of consultation to one of collaboration. There were meetings with the trustees to discuss the relationship, and the IEC looks forward to future and further discussions. Topics which we are also looking to include are the review of policies and the review of procedures for Indigenous hiring. Some of the more notable events were the draft of the smudging protocols, which were presented, and the presentation of the Algonquin protocols to the Board of Trustees. The IAC met with the Board of Trustees to provide information regarding the Algonquin protocols. These protocols will be adopted by the IEC. The Algonquin protocols document is a living document and will be updated as issues arise. There have also been appointments to, we now have a representative from the IEC as the Committee of the Whole rep, and we have an appointment as a representative from the IEC to the Committee of the Whole budget. We have spoken and had consultations with the Indigenous school within a college. And we have been reviewing Indigenous data, which includes the report on examination of elementary and secondary program pathways and achievement outcomes, sense of belonging at school results, financial data, TAG, and police in schools. So we're looking forward to having further meetings and discussions around the various review of policies and, of course, procedures around how those processes shake out from the policy review. I wanted to keep it short and sweet and leave it open for any questions that people may have. So, Kachimi Gwitch. And I actually, before I do that, I will like to, just to ensure that I've covered everything properly, ask Jody. I'm not seeing her yet, but I'm sure she's here. Jody Kohoko, the Indigenous Education Principal. Not sure if I see her. I know she was telling me she had trouble with her internet earlier. So what if she joins us, or if she has anything to add? I'm sure she will. So I'm just wondering, is there any questions from the trustees?
And I am not seeing Principal Kohoko here this evening, but we do have a question for you from Trustee Bell.
Certainly.
Thank you very much for the presentation. My question to you is, with this report, if there are ways, either now or in the future, that we could improve relations and move forward. I think hearing from you on what those would be, I think about the budget process and input into that from the Indigenous Education Council. And then I also think about connecting with students and maybe student voice from both the Indigenous communities that we have within the school board, but others as well, in making those connections. I'd be curious to hear if there are things that are on your mind and the mind of the council that they would look forward to improving. Thank you very much, Monique.
Thanks, Justine. Connecting with the students and the student voice, absolutely. As I stated initially, we're looking at moving from a relationship of consultation to one of collaboration, which for me means participation and working together, a working relationship in a variety of issues as it arises. The one that comes to mind right away is while we discuss policies and the review of these policies and how we can collaborate with the review of various policies, we're also looking at how the processes that come out of those policies. So for example, we spoke a lot about and had various presentations on the Indigenous hiring practices. And now we would like to see how those policies shake out. Currently, while it is recommended and highly encouraged to have Indigenous representation on hiring, when, especially when, well, not just when people are looking at hiring Indigenous, but also when they're hiring, the process is that those who are qualified to sit on those panels are generally vice president or vice principals or principals, but they don't have any, there's no leave for them. So what ends up happening is that the few people who are Indigenous are called on a lot more often because they're the ones who are eligible, yet they don't receive leave in order to participate on these panels. And so it greatly impacts their workload and their ability, not just to do their job, but to sit on these panels. So there needs to be a change in that process in order that, perhaps the eligibility is opened so that there are other people who are able to sit on the panels, not necessarily just the few who are in the system as vice principals and principals, and also that they are given leave so that it doesn't unfairly impact their workload. And also, if there are people who are, when they're on these panels and when they're doing these hirings, if they're impeded in this way, you're not going to get their best work either. So, you know, they may not necessarily hire the best person simply because they're overworked, overstressed, you know. So not just being consulted on how the policies need to be changed, but how the IEC is looking to how we can work with the board to develop how the policies roll out or how the processes roll out of these policies. The Indigenous hiring is one that I think of right away. Of course, there are going to be, I understand, I saw all the policies that need to be reviewed, and I don't envy anybody on all that work. But, you know, in order for us to really be a collaborator, then that's simply something we have to take on, to be part of the discussion from the get-go, from the beginning, and not brought in later, but brought in right away, in order that we can best affect equitable change.
Thank you for that. Anything further, Trustee Bell?
Always, but I'm going to hold back for tonight. Thank you so much.
We should have coffee.
We should indeed have cupcakes. Are there any other questions here? Oh, I see Trustee Campbell's hand is up. Go ahead, Trustee Campbell.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation. I was intrigued by one of your most recent comments. Do I understand fundamentally that you folks would like to be involved in the drafting and, I guess, implementation of procedure as well as policy? Is that what fundamentally comes down to? Yeah. Okay. That's
yes.
Okay.
Because we can see from this particular policy and procedure that there needs to be Indigenous representation. There needs to be a collaborative approach.
It's interesting. It echoes some comments from at least one of our other advisory committees. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I can understand that.
For further questions? Trustee Penny.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you very much for your presentation, Monique. I'm just wondering, what more can we do to encourage the growth of Indigenous languages in our board, to further that sort of cultural thing that needs to be maintained and expanded? What more can we do?
Do you mean as curriculum?
Yes, or as just about anything though that we can do. So,
well, you know, there's so many ways. Where, for example, when even when people do land acknowledgement in this territory as Algonquin people, our greeting is kwe kwe. So these types of you know, when there's signage, when there's presentations, when there's lots of little places, you know, to help normalize the language. You know, in the same way that language, you see things in French and English, perhaps seeing things in French and English and Algonquin, which there are several dialects of Algonquin, but I would assume the ones closest to this particular area. I'm sure it's a project that we would have to discuss to determine what's the best way to go with that. Offering, you know, when my son went to school up north, he had a choice of taking either Cree or French. So having that choice given, if as a second language, if you know, for people to take French or Algonquin. I know of several speakers. That's okay. And when you look at the hiring practices, when you're hiring Indigenous people, because of systemic barriers, their education may be a barrier for the hiring of Indigenous people or Algonquin people. But when you're looking at courses, language courses, perhaps you can look at what the particular criteria would be for that, for language speaking, and ensure that the criteria matches so that language speakers can be hired. And having Indigenous people, obviously the IEC, but you know, there are people, Algonquin people, who can also help, who are more than happy to help with that sort of thing.
thank you very much for that very practical and good answer. I really appreciate that.
Thanks.
Moving on into Trustee Huff.
Not a question, but just an expression of gratitude, Monique, for your work on the committee and the work of all of the people who come out on a monthly basis and now want to come out more often to play. It has been a right wonderful privilege and honor to learn from you. And this last year in particular, as I've watched the development of your Algonquin protocol, I've just sat in amazement and awe of a process that was completely not colonial. It was anti-colonial. It was completely Indigenous, and it was beautiful to watch. And I thank you for letting me have a sideline seat for that process. So my gratitude, thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. And we've really enjoyed and been very grateful that you've been so faithful in coming out and being there for us and answering our questions. And you've been so helpful and such a lovely presence in the meetings, and we really appreciate it. Thank you. Miigwech.
And I'm not seeing any more hands up with questions, but I would like to echo the words of Trustee Huff and say to you, Monique, and to all of those who have participated in the Indigenous Education Council, Kichimigwech. This has been a great privilege for all of us to have a group like this who are so dedicated to making things better and to collaborating with us. So thank you. And thank you for your presentation.
Thanks, Lynn. And you've been such a wonderful champion for us as well. And we really do appreciate it. You've been such a staunch supporter of all of our work, and it's made it so much, it's made it possible, really. So thank you. We appreciate it very much.
And we have a long way to go together.
Yeah, we do. Looking forward to it.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
And we will move on then with our agenda to the report from board in camera. I'll call upon Vice Chair Penny.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And the board met in camera this evening and reports and recommends as follows on a motion by Trustee Blackburn, which I will second, that staff be authorized to proceed as directed in board in camera with respect to a financial matter.
Thank you, Trustee Penny. We have had our debate and discussion in camera on this, and this will be a recorded vote. So I hope everyone has their e-scribe ready for registering their vote on the question. If Manager Guthrie could please open the vote.
Excuse me, Chair, it's not the right resolution or motion.
Thank you for that. Can we just check and do it again?
Thank you, Trustee Ellis. For some reason, I'm having a bit of technical difficulty. I'm not seeing any votes. With your indulgence, Chair, I will do a roll call vote and work towards correcting that for our next series of votes.
Please do the roll call then. My e-scribe is still registering vote in progress. And I did submit my vote, but if it's not working properly, it's not working properly. So roll call when you're ready.
Trustee Blackburn.
In favor.
Trustee Huff.
In favor.
Trustee Campbell.
In favor.
Trustee Ellis.
In favor.
Trustee Jennings.
Favor.
Trustee Penny.
In favor.
Trustee Lyra.
In favor.
Trustee Bell.
In favor.
Trustee Fisher.
In favor.
Trustee Scott,
In favor.
and that is 10 in favor.
So the vote is unanimous among those present in favor of the motion. Is there anything further in your report, Trustee Penny?
No, Madam Chair, that concludes my in-camera report for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Moving on then, we come to the chair's briefing for this evening. And on behalf of the board, I would like to begin my remarks by offering condolences to those families who lost loved ones in the storm that hit our community. We would also like to recognize those who have faced and continue to face considerable hardship as a result of this devastating storm. At the same time, we extend our deepest appreciation and gratitude to everyone who worked so hard these past few weeks: hydro workers, first responders, and local volunteers. And also a huge thank you to our facilities staff members who worked to clear debris and reopen schools, and to everyone who came together to support students and families. Even as we reflect on recent events here in Ottawa, though, we cannot ignore the horrific tragedy that took place just 1 week ago at an elementary school in Uvalde, Texas. Our thoughts and deepest sympathies are with all those who were affected. Tomorrow is the 1st of June, and I did want to mention that among the many dates of significance happening, the OCDSB will be marking National Indigenous History Month and Pride Month. And that concludes my briefing for this evening. Are there any questions? Seeing none, I would like to turn then to the director for her briefing. Director Williams-Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, Chair, I'd like to echo Chair Scott's comments and extend my sincere gratitude to our staff for their outstanding efforts following the storm, as well as the patience of our community and our school communities as we iteratively brought schools back into open. And we have also been able to slowly but gradually and iteratively get back to remote learning for some students as we make progress over the course of this week. Regarding school closures, I can report that on Wednesday, tomorrow, Maryvale High School will be the only school to remain closed as it is still without power. We saw through the storm response how community members stepped forward to help. Indeed, through the school year, our district has been very fortunate to have the support of many volunteers. These individuals and businesses have shown outstanding commitment to supporting students, and their compassion and dedication has continued to impact our schools. This week, we shared on our website the names of the nominees for the Community Recognition Awards, and I recommend that you visit our website to read more. Thursday is Provincial Election Day. We encourage everyone who is eligible to cast their vote. More information can be found on Elections Ontario website. Also, a reminder to elementary school families that Friday, June 3rd is a PA day, and there will be no classes for elementary school students on this day. On Monday, June 6th, next week, the OCDSB will be hosting the 5th annual Black Youth Forum. Black students representing each OCDSB high school will gather virtually to share, learn, and reflect. In addition, next week on June 9th, the OCDSB speaker series presents What to Say When Nothing Seems to Work, Communication Through Connection, a webinar with Dr. Adèle Lafrance. This workshop will provide parents and guardians and families with strategies for emotion-focused parenting. Registration details are available on our website. And that is all for my update today, Chair.
Thank you, Madam Director. And we have a question from Trustee Jenikins.
Thank you, Chair. My question is in regards to Castro Valley Elementary School. It definitely sustained heavy damage from the storm. Can you just give an update on the reopening of Castor Valley Elementary?
Thank you, Trustee Jenkins. Yes, indeed, that is the school that probably sustained the most significant damage. We were not optimistic about opening this week. However, our facilities and maintenance teams have been very active in ensuring that they secured a safe site for reopening, because we do know that the community, and that when I say school community, I mean not just the families around, but also the school community of staff and children were anxious to see Castor Valley back open. So we are very pleased that we're able to open securely tomorrow. And again, it is with a vote of thanks to the maintenance teams, facilities teams, and the outreach to our trades partners to be able to do that. I know CFO Carson has opened his mic because I think that he may have a further comment on the reopening of Castor Valley tomorrow.
Chair, the only thing I would add is that the restoration work is not complete. Originally, we had hoped to be able to get all of that work done, which would have meant that the reopening would have been next Monday or Tuesday. However, just like so many other things in the world, it was clear that those materials we would require to totally finish the job would not be available to us. So we switched the focus to securing the building, making sure it's safe and dry, and we will we'll finish that restoration work in the first week of July. So the building is certainly safe. We have tremendous work by everybody involved to get the building, the inside clean, the outside secure, and as I said, the restoration work will be completed in that first week of July. Thank you.
Thank you.
And moving on to Trustee Blackburn.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you, I have a question for the director, and I'll look to you for guidance. I have a question for the director in regards to her decision to cancel an internationally recognized peace seeker who was going to interact with members of the OCDSB community, the Honorable Erwin Kotler. So I would like her to, and I got a lot of concerns from the community about that, why she did that. And so I would like an explanation from her why she chose to make that decision. Is this something I can ask her now, or should I wait till the end of the meeting?
I think it's better to ask it under new business since it's not directly connected to the content of the briefing this evening.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Moving on then, you're very welcome. And we will move on then to the COVID update since there are no other questions on the briefing. Madam Director.
Thank you, and through you, Chair, I'll turn it to AD Reynolds, albeit the update is brief. I will turn it over to AD Reynolds to provide it.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. As you're aware, last week we did communicate with our students, staff, and their families that as of yesterday, Monday, May 30th, the wearing of masks inside OCDSB schools and buildings would move from mandatory to optional based on the most recent information we've been receiving from OPH in accordance with the motion that we received from the board. Happy to answer any questions.
And we do have some questions, beginning with Trustee Bell.
Thank you very much, and through you, Chair. I'm hopeful that the director or associate director could speak to if we have not and will not receive explicit guidance concerning when or when not to institute a mask mandate in our schools, whether or not there is consideration among the administration to determine a set of parameters that would indicate whether or not it was time to mandate a mask or not. I'm looking forward, I'm not looking forward to it, but looking forward towards the next wave. Will we have to come forth with a motion if indicators get to the extent that it did, where we voted almost unanimously to support a mask mandate within our schools for the safety and security of students.
So through you, Madam Chair, our position, like most school districts, is to follow the provincial guidance from the Ministry of Education and the Chief Medical Officer for the province, unless otherwise directed, I guess, by the board. So in this case, as you were aware, the province had not instituted a masking mandate. OPH now for several months has been in the position not to make any explicit recommendations to school districts and also to follow that provincial guidance. So that is why we did not receive an explicit recommendation from OPH to institute a mask mandate or explicit direction to remove one. So in the event that there is some further change to conditions in the community, it might be possible that the medical officer of health, the local medical officer of health, may make recommendations to school districts. That would be under her purview. But we have not extended discretion to our site administrators, principals, or our own staff, to including senior staff, to make a determination to impose a masking mandate outside of any recommendations or direction we receive from the Ministry of Education, the Chief Medical Officer of Health, or OPH.
Trustee Bell?
Just quickly in follow up then, procedurally, if we wanted to set out some guidance and parameters of when we would expect the local situation to get as grave as it has the last time that we voted to make it unanimous, if we in fact wanted to direct staff to come up with the parameters from which we would institute a mask mandate, so it is clear to the public what is the threshold we as OCDSB take into account, then we would have to bring a motion to the board in order to direct the staff to do that. Could someone please clarify? Thank you.
Through you, Chair, I'll enter into the conversation here because I want to reiterate what the AD has said. It is very, it is a little problematic and concerning if we start going down the road of directing staff to develop parameters because we then are going outside of our scope to do that. When we are given direction, it is based on the advice of the Chief Medical Officer of Health for the province, which informs the ministry. And so when we do step outside of that, the qualification to choose the data that would inform such parameters should not come from anybody other than people who are charged and informed with that kind of decision making, not just authority, but content. So I certainly am not, and I certainly take my guidance and our guidance from the Ministry of Health as well as Education, and so I would really not know where to begin to prescribe and describe what parameters we would undertake.
One quick tracer to that then follow up, Chair, if I may. Well, then would it be possible for the board, the administration, to engage with Ottawa Public Health to come up with some sort of parameters around that? Because from what I understand, they will not give guidance on whether or not we should mandate. So when would it, we're left in a position where if we believe as a board mandating is the best action to keep our community and students and staff safe during heightened waves of COVID, then how will we know when to mandate? Will it be up to the Board of Trustees to come up with motions every time, or is there another way that we could work with our Ottawa Chief Medical Officer to ensure that we have a common understanding of when it is appropriate and when it is not?
So through you, Chair, certainly we have been very fortunate in Ottawa that the Chief Medical Officer for Ottawa has been very, very responsive when we have reached out. Certainly she has been in direct contact with me where I have asked questions. And so we do know that we have continued meetings and arrangements for continued collaboration with Ottawa Public Health. So whether, if the trustee is asking if we are going to be able to have those channels for guidance, I would submit that we probably will, because that they have done so far. I'd also like to submit that we have to recall that we did in fact have a masking mandate that was imposed on school districts for almost 2 years through the guidance of the Chief Medical Officer of Health of the province. And so it's not to suggest that there has been no guidance in that direction. There has indeed been a guidance in the direction based on the information that these bodies have determined to be the information that will influence decision. If trustees choose to deviate from that guidance, that is, as demonstrated, that's the purview of this unique board. But I would suggest that it is not to say that we've never had the guidance, because we have had that. We may have that again in the future, and it has come from the Chief Medical Officer of Health, who is duly informed in that manner. So I think if the bottom line is whether trustees want to draw from that body of experts, and if the question is, will we continue to have access to conversation with Ottawa Public Health directly, I would submit that we will.
Thank you.
If that's everything, then we will move on to Trustee Jenkins.
Thank you, Chair. My question is in regards to the community use of schools. Normally at this time, parent school councils start planning for the fall. Will the portal be open to the parent school councils to start planning for the fall, return of school in the fall before school ends this summer?
Through you, Chair, I'll ask CFO Carson to pick that up. His team oversees the community use of schools.
Thank you, Chair. We do expect that portal to be open next week. Maybe not Monday, but it should be open before the end of the week to begin those bookings.
Thank you, that's all.
And Trustee Campbell.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'd just like to follow up a little bit more on the nature of the relationship and guidance provided by OPH, and I guess what therefore we might expect in the future. I'd just like to ask, I guess, to start, whether staff agree that throughout the 2 years off and on, OPH has provided supplementary guidance and advice, which either staff have acted on themselves. I recall when the province effectively said, let her rip with respect to extracurriculars and opening things, OPH advised, maybe not so quick. And staff took that advice, and we were a little bit more cautious in terms of how we opened up. And I think there have been other circumstances where we have taken advice and guidance from OPH. Sometimes it has been from the board directing that in terms of the extension of the provincial masking mandate to kinders, and in other regards. So would it be fair to say that OPH has provided supplementary guidance and advice to staff over and above that of the province?
So through you, Madam Chair, yes, especially we saw this over the first year and a half, particularly in the first full school year. And heading into this one, OPH did provide specific recommendations to the local school districts that went beyond what was in the provincial opening guidance. One example that stands out is the use of woodwinds, or wind instruments, I should say, rather. They provided a number of written recommendations that we did follow. And in fact, at some point, we decided to drop some and continue with others as our local circumstances dictate. Heading through into 2022, OPH management did take a different stance, deciding that for this time period, they would align with the provincial direction and not provide recommendations that would supersede that. Whether that will change in the future is at the discretion of the medical officer of health. but they
course.
have when they felt it necessary.
Okay, no, thank you very much. So I guess last public meeting, which is I think delayed so a little while ago now, I had suggested perhaps amongst others that we seek OPH's opinions whether they had sort of rethought, given the prevailing circumstances, their public, very public suggestion, maybe not directed through staff, but certainly through the media, public suggestion that they supported the reinstatement of mask mandates in local school boards. We're staff, I guess I'd like to understand the reticence, if staff have an understanding of OPHs in terms of simply asking, if the prevailing circumstances today were those, 6 weeks ago, would you have made that statement? Or, it's a bit as simple as that. It's not a recommendation. It's not a, so I guess what I'm sort of wondering is, these things could be suggested in relatively clear terms, without getting anybody getting into trouble or hot water. Do you have a sense of why this reluctance exists? Or
through you, Madam Chair, it's a hard one to answer, and I would not want to speak on behalf of OPH. I don't necessarily understand why the comment you referred to was made, and perhaps why there wasn't communication directly with school districts. And there's a lot going on, and OPH has been very busy and are providing a great deal of support to the entire city. I think they are reluctant to provide direction to school districts outside of or what might be perceived as direction to school districts outside of what the provincial guidance is. But when the question was framed, Trustee Campbell, along the lines of how you had framed it some time ago, are circumstances today what they were when that comment was made? And I think, and again, I don't want to answer for them, and I could be accused of speculating here because I wasn't provided the clearly articulated reasoning, that the information that they provided to us on May 20th would lead us to conclude that circumstances today are not in fact what they were.
Thank you. That is very helpful. So effectively, in sum, and tell me if I'm right, don't put words in your mouth, effectively, it's staff's understanding that OPH sent smoke signals to staff to indicate that, yes, their advice has changed. And that's all that OPH could bring themselves to do. Is that correct?
OPH has let us know that circumstances have improved significantly since that comment was made.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I think I have my answer. I will say that I object to a certain extent to OPH's stance on this. It is a shadow play, and I don't think it's terribly professional on their part. I don't think it's correct to put a school board in the position of having to evaluate scientific evidence as whether trends are low or lowering or low enough, and these sort of leading, teasing tidbits, to be honest, are, I have to say, my personal opinion is not terribly professional. Anyway, I'll leave it at that, and thank you very much to staff.
Thank you, Trustee Campbell. Trustee Blackburn.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you, I would like to respectfully disagree with what Trustee Campbell just said. I think, from my perspective, Ottawa Public Health has been extremely supportive of the OCDSB. Dr. Etches met with us, sat with us for a significant amount of time when she was probably not getting much sleep, when she's got other boards to deal with. Then I apologize. I can't remember how many times she came. And then I remember the second person in command came. Staff have repeated over and over and over how much communication they have with OPH. And for trustees to ask our staff to, reveal the contents verbatim of these discussions is, from my point of view, very unreasonable. And I commend the professionalism of AD Reynolds, because we have to maintain our trust with these people. I don't know. I know that the storm, and I know my community was quite hit hard by it, and as others were, Trustee Fisher and other trustees, and probably everybody. But I have since gone out into my community. I had to, in fact, visit a school today because they lost their principal passed away, and I felt I should go. And I was in their school. Hardly anybody is wearing a mask. People are posting on Facebook, their kids are playing baseball, their kids are playing football, their kids are playing this, that, and the other thing. They're not wearing masks. You go to the grocery store, you go to the gas station, you go to the drugstore. Very, very few people are wearing masks. The notion that the few people that are wearing masks in our schools is making a significant dent in anything is, and again, I proclaim I am not a scientist, I am not a doctor, but I have common sense. Common sense tells me the staff made the right decision. This mask mandate was illegal, went against what the ministry suggested, was causing more harm than good. And I commend the staff, I commend the Director of Education for showing some leadership and doing what she did. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Blackburn. And I'm not seeing any further hands. Trustee Fisher and then Trustee Ellis. Trustee Fisher.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. I really didn't want to wade into this discussion, but I will, just to add some facts and some context. I think it's been known and it's been crystal clear to this board that the actions that we've taken over the past 2 years are anything but illegal. I think we've been told time and time again that as a board of trustees that are responsible to the Ottawa-Carleton District School Board community, our students and our staff, that we do have a duty of care in terms of providing a healthy and safe workplace. And so the actions that we've taken over the last 2 years have been anything but illegal. So I would disagree with that opinion and that assertion. I would also like to, I guess, respond or react to, I think, a characterization, maybe this is just the way that I'm hearing it, a characterization from our senior team that the decision that we took in April to reinstate a temporary masking policy was somehow cavalier or out of step or misguided. Yes, the Chief Medical Officer of Ontario certainly had his view and his opinion, and so did the Ministry of Education. But at the end of the day, we had a Chief Medical Officer of Ottawa who made a very public statement about the situation at the time and went as far as saying that, in her professional opinion, recommended the reinstatement of a temporary masking policy. As far as I'm concerned, that's as close to advice and recommendation as you can get from our Chief Medical Officer of Ottawa. And so I have to pay attention to that as a board trustee. And I think it's also important to note that that was a view at a time that was being reinforced by the Independent Science Table, that was being reinforced by Public Health Ontario. So this perception that the board was somehow misguided or out of step or was being cavalier or perhaps reckless in passing such a motion, I think it's very dangerous for me. And so I'll just react that way, because I think some of the words that have been used tonight, we can have a difference of opinion for sure. But I certainly don't think that this board acted in a misguided and reckless way. And it's really disappointing to me that there's perhaps a perception among our senior team that that's the case. Some might suggest.
Trustee Fisher,
I have the floor, Chair. Some might suggest.
Trustee Fisher, I am going to interrupt you now because the intention here is not to relitigate, and I'm not at all sure that staff have in fact suggested that the board's action was cavalier.
Well, I'm glad that that's your view. I'm sharing my view with the board, and I'm entitled to do that as a board member. And I would also say that some in our community might suggest that the way that the lifting of the masking mandate occurred without any debate or discussion with this board was perhaps reckless as well. And so I just think we need to be very careful about how we're managing this issue, how we're looking at it from a staff perspective, from a board perspective. We're coming at it from different perspectives. but I'm just really concerned about the view that the board somehow has acted in some kind of a misguided or out of step way. I just fundamentally disagree with that. We are where we are. I think Trustee Blackburn is correct in suggesting that the situation has changed and people feel very differently about where we are with the pandemic, and that's totally fair. But I'm just concerned about some of the reflections about how the board acted a month ago based on the information that it had before it from the Chief Medical Officer of Ottawa and from others.
Moving on then to Trustee Ellis.
Yes, Chair. I'm just wondering if you might like to give the trustee who accused the board of acting illegally a chance to reconsider her statement.
I think that the opinion of illegality or otherwise is a matter of opinion. There are many members of the public who felt the same way. There are many members of the public who disagree with that, and the board itself has received legal opinion which did not indicate that the action was illegal in any way. So I will ask Trustee Blackburn if she wishes to retract that allegation. Trustee Blackburn?
Understanding that, yes, our board received legal opinion, but that there was legal opinions that differed throughout the province. And I've often said you can stick 10 lawyers in a room and ask them a question, and you're not going to get 10 answers that are the same. So I'm not inclined to, and as you have stated, other members of our community that I represent, which is my duty, have indicated that they share that opinion, and it's a legal opinion. As we get legal opinions all the time that Trustee Ellis has disagreed on legal opinions.
Trustee Blackburn, I will stop. Stop you there.
So I'm not inclined to do so. If you as the chair ordered me to do so, then obviously I will do it with reluctance.
And I will say that you have indeed correctly stated that there are conflicting legal opinions out there. However, the matter is whether or not the board deliberately acted in an illegal way.
I never said that.
And I don't think and if that was not your intent to state that, then I think you've just made that clear.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Are there other speakers on this? And I remind all of the board members that all of us are expected to uphold the decisions of the board when they have been duly made with the majority voting in favor. That any decision that the board makes is a decision that has been made by all of us. So moving on then, if there are no further questions on the COVID update, we are at matters for action. Well, not quite at matters for action. Confirmation of the board minutes from the 29th of March, 2022. Do we have a mover to confirm those minutes? Trustee Lyra will move. Is there a seconder? Trustee Jenkins, thank you. And I would like to express appreciation to staff for revising the minutes to include the full discussion that happened at that particular meeting. Are there any errors or omissions now that we've had a chance to review the revised version? Seeing none, I will call the question then on confirming the minutes of the 29th of March, 2022. All those in favor? And opposed? And the motion is carried. Moving on then to the minutes of the 26th of April board meeting 2022. Do we have a mover for those? Trustee Ellis, seconded by Trustee Blackburn, I believe. And in these minutes, are there any errors or omissions? And seeing none, I will call the question on confirming the 26th of April minutes. All those in favor? And opposed? And the motion is carried. Is there any business arising from either of these sets of board minutes from the 29th of March or the 26th of April? And seeing none, that brings us then to matters for action, beginning with receipt of the Committee of the Whole report. Vice Chair Penny.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to move receipt of the Committee of the Whole report from May the 10th, 2022.
And do we have a seconder for that? Trustee Campbell, thank you. Are there any errors or omissions in the Committee of the Whole report? Trustee Lyra?
On page 16, a recorded vote was asked for by the student trustees, and we didn't actually record the vote.
I'm just looking at.
Sorry, Madam Chair. I'm having trouble keeping my minutes open, but we'll take that under advisement and go back and have a look at that.
Thank you for noting that, Trustee Lyra. Are there any other errors or omissions in this particular report? Seeing none, I will call the question on receipt with the potential that there will be a revision to the report to reflect the recorded vote. All those in favor? And those opposed? And the report is received. The motion is carried. Back to you, Trustee Penny.
Thank you very much. And there are several motions attached to the report, Madam Chair. So I'm going to go through them one by one. And I suppose you're going to seek consent. And if non-consent, then move down to the bottom. Am I correct?
That is correct. If they are non-consent, they will be considered later in the meeting under item 11.3 on our agenda. And in terms of voting on these, I am assured by board services that we can vote on all of the consent items with a single vote, unless there is a specific request for a separate vote on any one of these motions, if it is consent.
Okay, so I'll start with approval of Vimy Ridge Accommodation Solutions on a motion by Trustee Jenkins, which I will second. And the motion is on your screen. That commencing on January 1st, 2023, and thereafter until new boundaries can be established and the new school opened for Finlow Creek No. 2 Elementary School students moving into the Vimy Ridge public school attendance boundary on or after the date established by means of an executed deed or rental agreement will be directed to Robert Baden Public School for grades K to 6 and will feed to Roberta Bondar Public School for grades 7 to 8. And part B, that younger siblings of existing Vimy Ridge Public School students or students who can demonstrate that they moved into the Finley Creek community before January 1st, 23, or for those who moved within Finley Creek at any time, but can establish residency in the community prior to January 1st, 2023, attend Vimy Ridge Public School until the boundaries for said school may be amended.
Thank you, Trustee Penny. Is this a consent item? If it is not consent, would you please raise your hand or speak out? And it would appear that this is a consent item. So we will deal with it when we have seen the other recommendations. Trustee Penny?
Thank you very much. And a motion by Trustee Lyra that I will second, that the expenditure of $1.5 million for approximately 3,130 student Chromebooks be authorized.
Thank you. And I will ask again, is this a consent item? And again, it would appear that this is a consent item. So we will deal with it a little later. Trustee Penny?
Thank you very much. And approval of child sexual abuse prevention policy on a motion by Trustee Campbell, which I will second. That policy P.142.SCO, child sexual abuse prevention, attached as Appendix A to report 22-035 be approved as amended.
And I note that we have supplemental information from that was requested of staff that has been brought forward this evening, which means changes to the policy that have not yet been approved specifically by the board. So I think this is a non-consent item that we will deal with when we reach the non-consent items. Moving on then to the next one.
Moving on, approval of policy development and management policy on a motion by Trustee Campbell, which I will second. That revisions to P.001.gov, policy development and management attached as Appendix A to report 22-040 be approved as amended. And Part B, that staff be directed to prepare a report with recommendations on policy committee structure models and terms of reference to be presented to board.
And again, I will ask if this is a consent item. And if it is not, would you please raise your hand or speak up? And I believe that the motion under 11.1D was also a consent item. So that means that we have three motions that we can vote on together as a group. The approval of the Vimy Ridge accommodation solutions, the approval of purchase Chromebooks, and the approval of policy development and management policy. So if we can take the vote on those now.
And fingers crossed, your e-scribe will work this time. Waiting for your vote, Madam Chair.
It says submitting vote. I had pushed the submit button and it would appear that it's just going around and around and around. But I have voted in favor. And we do have a result. The motion is carried with 10 in favor. In other words, unanimous among those present. Thank you very much, Manager Guthrie. That brings us next to item 11.2 on our agenda, report from the Ad Hoc Committee for Board Self-Evaluation and the Director Performance Evaluation process from the 12th of May. Trustee Penny.
Hello. So, Madam Chair, I think that we're going to vote to receive the minutes first. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So I'd like to move that we receive the minutes from the ad hoc committee for board self-evaluation and director performance evaluation process on May the 12th.
And is there a seconder for that? I will ask again, is there a seconder for the motion to receive the report?
I do see Trustee Jenkins, Madam Chair.
And I now see Trustee Jenkins' hand up too. Thank you. So we have the motion moved and seconded. And are there any errors or omissions in the report? Seeing none, I will call the question on receipt. All those in favor? And those opposed? And the motion to receive is carried. Anything further, Trustee Penny?
There was an item of business within the report, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
On a motion by Trustee Huff, which I will second, that the job description and performance assessment guide for the 2022-2023 evaluation cycle, which are appendices B, A, and B to policy 051.gov, evaluation of Director of Education and Secretary of the Board, be approved. And it's on your screen.
Thank you. And for those who are curious about the other two parts of the motion, this part is one that does require board approval. The other two parts were internal to the committee and do not require board approval. So we have the motion before us. And I will ask if there is any debate on this, or if we can simply treat it as a consent item. And it would appear that there is no desire for debate, so I will ask if Manager Guthrie could please open the vote on this motion.
Through you, Madam Chair, I do not see Trustee Fisher vote.
And we do have all the votes in and a result, and the motion is carried. 10 in favor, no abstentions, or none opposed and no abstentions. Anything further, Trustee Penny?
That concludes my report for this report, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And that brings us then to the non-consent items, of which we have one, which is the approval of the child sexual abuse prevention policy, which was, as I recall, originally moved by Trustee Campbell. And I will go to Trustee Campbell for any introduction necessary, but perhaps before that, if trustees would like, we could hear from staff with regard to the supplemental information that has been provided. Madam Director.
Thank you, Chair. I was struggling with my mute button. So if I may, I'll pass it to Associate Director Reynolds, who was our point person and lead on this particular project. So over to you, AD Reynolds.
Sure, thank you. And through you, Madam Chair. So you did receive a memo and a more updated version of the draft policy. You can see in the memo, it does outline the areas that receive some attention following the discussion that we had at committee of the whole, including further reconciliation of the word of the use of the words child and student, changes to the definitions of grooming in section 2.6. The definition of protected grounds was also updated. The definition of sexual abuse in section 2.8 and the definition of sexual exploitation were all amended following the discussion at committee of the whole. You can see the draft policy there. Happy to answer any further questions.
Thank you. So if you would like to proceed with your introduction, Trustee Campbell.
Yes, thank you. The actual introduction will be quite brief. I thank staff for all the work they put into this. I know for a fact they had a lot of conversations around just how it would turn out, and the work is appreciated. However, I do have a question for staff, not quite introduction, but I'll use some of the time, which may lead to a proposed amendment. And that goes, as staff know, I have a bit of a continuing concern with the dual use of the words child and student. My understanding is that pretty much throughout the current draft, child has been replaced by student, and that it is the staff intent that the policy apply not indeed just to children, but to all students. Could I get that verified by staff, that is their intent, that the scope is broader than children?
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. I'll start a little bit with how this originated, and certainly it was from a child protection lens that the conversations began with the Center for Child Protection, and that was, the driving concern, trying to prevent further child exploitation, sexual abuse. But we also did feel that following the conversation we were at committee of the whole, that we did not see this policy being limited only to those students under the age of 18, that there wasn't a magic line being drawn at the age of 18 that would then preclude them from receiving some of the same preventative measures in education just because they'd reached that milestone birthday. So the intention, the driver is child protection, but the use of word student does certainly open the policy to those who have reached the age of adulthood.
Okay, great, thank you. I guess I may only be speaking for myself, but I sort of suspect not, because I've been sort of struggling with the use of the two terms. I believe that the term child continues to exist only in two places, if I got it right, the title, and then I think it's the objective statement, perhaps. And everywhere else now, a child has been replaced by student. Which makes sense to me if that's indeed the staff intent. So I guess what I'm wondering is, would it not make sense to replace those final two instances of the word child, notwithstanding the original impetus for this thing, which I understand, with students, so it removes any ambiguity. Certainly, if I were a naive reader coming to this policy draft and I saw the title is about children, the objective statement is about children, I might assume that all references to students simply meant child students, right? Unless it was explicitly stated otherwise somewhere in the policy. I don't believe that is. So I guess I'm thinking that it might be wise to, since the scope of the policy that staff are proposing is in fact larger than the original vision, as I understand it, right? That is what's being proposed. It is now for all students, right? That we call it what it is, and we make it the student sexual abuse policy, and replace the word child with student in the objective statement. I believe it's still there. I guess what I'd like is a staff comment. For some reason, cause undue anxiety or problems. It seems natural to me.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair, and certainly if the executive officer or legal counsel want to offer any further comments on this, I don't see any concerns with making those changes. I think perhaps the reason why the term persists, the objective and the title, is that was the impetus for beginning this work, and we wanted to communicate that, especially to those members of the community who had been calling for further steps to be taken around, and they were using the words child protection, but functionally, whether it reads child in the title or the objective or student, I don't think really changes the impact of this policy. So if that is in fact the change that's proposed, I don't think staff would have any objection to that whatsoever.
Okay, well, I guess with that, Madam Chair, I'll propose an amendment to remove the 2 remaining instances of the word child with student in the title and the objective statement.
That is the amendment. It will need a seconder. Do we have a seconder for that?
I'll second it.
Sorry, who was that?
Lyra.
Trustee Lyra, thank you. So next question is whether this is a friendly amendment.
No.
It is not a friendly amendment, and therefore we will have some debate on it. I think you've had sufficient introduction, Trustee Campbell.
I agree.
So on the amendment then, and I'm just going to make a note because I already had Trustee Lyra and Trustee Bell, I believe, who wished to speak on the main motion, and on the amendment. We have begin with Trustee Lyra.
I understand the intent of this motion. I actually think it would read best as child and student, because that way, if somebody's trying to look up child sexual abuse prevention policy, which is going to be a frequently searched term if you're looking to find this kind of policy, I don't want to have the word child nowhere in the policy, but I hear Trustee Campbell's concerns about only seeing the word child at the top and then thinking it implies child to every student you read afterwards. I'm going to propose a sub-amendment in that it be child and student sexual abuse prevention policy and child and student sexual abuse in the objective statement.
So basically your amendment is to insert child and to precede the word student in the 2 instances cited in the amendment.
Yes.
And do we have a seconder for the sub-amendment?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Trustee Ellis. Any further introduction, Trustee Lyra?
Nothing beyond the searchability.
And I will ask if the sub-amendment is friendly. If it is not, please speak up.
I have a question before I determine that it's whether or not it's friendly.
Is it a question of the mover or a question of staff?
Staff.
Go ahead, please.
My question is, are there any instances where student would not cover child? So for example, in the preschool programs that we have, do we consider those students that are housed within our buildings? Are there any instances, like for example, when the community use of schools and the Boys and Girls Clubs come into our schools, for example, they might not be students, but they could be children. I wonder if there's any concern around the scope of this policy with regard to those.
Associate Director.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. I don't. This is certainly aimed at students who are students who are under our care. In our programs, community use of schools is a little bit different. Our policies do apply, but there's a different relationship there. Perhaps another example would be those that are in district-run infant toddler programs who are not day school students of the school. I don't want to put Manager Sinclair on the spot, but I just don't know how our policies is typically extended to those programs, and if those children would be considered students.
Through you, Chair. It is a good point. I mean, infant toddler program children aren't students, at least as contemplated by the College of Teachers, for example. With that said, I can tell you operationally, procedurally, how we've operated for years. If there are allegations of misconduct with respect to ITP children, infant toddler program children, we have used our procedure 542, which is misconduct towards students. We have treated them as students because they are in our care. I'm not sure. I mean, I guess it could lead to a nitpicking argument at some point later in the day, but it doesn't seem like a real risk, to be honest with you, because really this is about how do we protect the children in our care? What do we expect? And again, this is about what we're expecting staff to do when they're observing behavior that causes concern. We would certainly operate this as if it applies to their observations with respect to all children in the care of the district.
Trustee Bell, does that satisfy?
It does, and so therefore I would like the title of this and the objective to stay as children, because children would encompass students as well. Thank you very much.
So you are saying this is not friendly, this sub-amendment?
It's not friendly, no.
So back to the sub-amendment. Is there any further debate on the sub-amendment? Trustee Ellis, are you on this sub-amendment?
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
So I'd like to understand the scope. Excuse me, they gave me 3 minutes. We're at board. It's 5 minutes I get, isn't it?
Not when we're dealing with amendments and sub-amendments.
Okay. So we've touched on the scope of what this policy will, of who they will affect. It was brought up community use of schools. It's my understanding that our policies for our facilities also extend to people who are using our facilities. So I'm just wondering, if the Boys and Girls Club or let's say a church group has contracted to use community of schools, a staff member sees what they consider would trigger this policy, the behavior, would it be expected that this policy would cover that kind of a community use of schools and compel our staff this policy would compel our staff to report incidents that they thought rose to the level of the triggers in this policy?
So thank you, and through you, Madam Chair, I'll begin. I certainly invite others to step in. So this is a scenario where a rental group is in the building and a staff member happens to observe behavior that they might consider grooming, and whether this policy would then compel them to follow up.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So that's a fairly unique scenario. I think the staff member, or most of our staff members, especially if they belong to a professional college, would have an obligation if they see a concerning behavior where a child might be in danger to make a report to CAS. And that would be the appropriate agency to intervene with a third party. A staff member certainly could, report it, but this policy in particular focuses on our staff and volunteers and students under our care, not necessarily someone attending a community use of school program. You're right, our policies and procedures we do have our renters abide by them, but in terms of, for example, if there's a policy that might result in someone being disciplined, we're not in a position to discipline or investigate those that are not employees or volunteers of the district. So, and again, I don't know if Manager Sinclair has a further comment, but we can't. My
concern here is that we've got a policy that staff will have some confusion and understanding when it applies to them. I'm just wondering, should we make it explicit in this policy that it is only for children or students in the direct care of the OCDSB? Yeah, I'll leave it at that. I have trouble contemplating voting on this policy at all with this concern out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Ellis. And if you wish, you can always bring a different amendment later on to add that if you wish. Any other speakers on this sub-amendment? Seeing none, back to Trustee Lyra for wrap up.
So I think it is important that we have both the word child and the word student in the title and the objective line. I think if we remove the word child entirely from this document, it's going to be much harder to find if someone is looking up this policy. And I think Trustee Campbell raised a valid concern that if you only have the word child in the objective statement and you only have the word child in the title, it is going to be reasonable to infer that it only means child every time you read student below that. And so I would encourage my colleagues to support the sub-amendment.
So on the sub-amendment, which would add the words child and before student in the proposed amendment to substitute student for the two remaining instances of child, I will call the question and ask people please to put your hands up and or speak out so that I can count the vote properly. All those in favor of the sub-amendment?
Lyra in favor.
Campbell in favor.
Ellis in favor.
Fisher in favor.
Huff in favor.
Bell in favor.
Scott in favor. Any more in favor? And those opposed? And abstentions? So it looks as though the sub-amendment has carried. Anything further, Trustee Lyra, on the amendment?
Nope.
And back to my speakers list, I had on the amendment, Trustee Bell, did you wish to speak on the amendment?
No, I'm not sure what amendment, but I think I'm all right now.
This is the amendment now as sub-amended.
My question and point has been raised and resolved. Thank you.
Thank you. So are there any further speakers on the amendment as sub-amended? If not, I will go to Trustee Campbell for wrap-up.
Very briefly, I appreciate Trustee Lyra's reasoning and endorse the improvement. Thank you.
So I will call the question then on the amendment, and that again, I will ask if people raise their hands and also speak out. All those in favor?
Lyra in favor.
Ellis in favor.
Campbell in favor.
Jenkins in favor.
Huff in favor.
Bell in favor.
Scott in favor. And those opposed? And abstentions. So the amendment as sub-amended is also carried. And we are back to the main motion. Trustee Lyra, you were next on my list on the main motion.
Thanks. I have a question for staff about the definition for grooming they came up with. First, where did you find this definition? Where did it come from? What are we working from?
Thank you. It's through you, Madam Chair, and I don't know if the executive officer remembers many of the sources. It's a bit of an amalgam, if I recall correctly, from some recognized sources. Oh yeah, we can't hear you, even though you're off mute.
I don't know why.
The definition originally came from the Center for Child Protection, I believe, but it was modified to add some clarity around the intention of grooming behavior. As we've explained in the memo, the definition, when read in the context of the guiding principles section, we hoped would provide sufficient clarity to ensure it can't be misused by those seeking to impugn classroom discussions and the kinds of issues that you raised at the last meeting about what's happening in the US. It's not a straight definition from somewhere else. It's an amalgam, and I don't know if Manager Sinclair has any other clarification.
Searched several sources to try to find one that met all the needs, and we had to merge a few ideas.
Trustee Lara?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. I'm still apprehensive, although I think I might be apprehensive because of the way grooming is being used against the LGBTQ community. And I don't know how I would make a definition that meets all the needs that I'm looking to have met. All right, that was all. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on then to Trustee Bell on the main motion.
My issue has been raised and resolved. Thank you.
And Trustee Ellis on the main motion.
Yeah, in my earlier intervention on the sub amendment, I questioned whether I could support this with ambiguity as to who this exactly covers. However, I will be voting in support of the policy. It's better than not having it, and perhaps the scope and who more direction can be given in the procedures for our staff to understand when this would come into effect, and the public as well. Thanks.
Excuse me. Thank you, Trustee Ellis. And just a question to staff, because the amendments that are included and highlighted in the policy as it is attached to memo 22-062, which was with the supplemental information. Those actual amendments, I believe, were not approved in committee of the whole. So I think we probably do need somebody to move that we incorporate all of those amendments. Am I correct, Ms. Giroux?
Manager Guthrie may clarify, but I believe what's in yellow is a combination of things that were approved and some that were things that came under advisement. And I think that if the board is so willing, you could address them all by approving the policy as attached to the memo. And then that would incorporate all of them.
And if I look back,
policy as amended and attached to.
Yeah, I just try to find the right report here. So the motion that was approved in committee of the whole made reference to attached as Appendix A to report 22-035. So we should amend the motion to make reference to the correct report, which would be report 22-062. Trustee Bell.
I would just like to clarify that memo number 22-062 in its summary of revisions I believe does not capture the revision that was passed at committee of the whole that I had put forward, which is revision 4.1b, which is in fact included in the memo attached to that report for my fellow trustees' information. And you can tell that it is included because it is in bold.
So that amendment is in the version attached to the memo, Chair Scott, which means that the approach that you outlined would ensure that we were capturing both those amendments carried at committee as well as those things that were given to staff to take under advisement and update and are reflected in the version attached to the memo. So you've correctly outlined the process.
And so that still means that we need to have an amendment to the main motion to reflect the correct report.
Yes, as attached to memo 22-062.
Trustee Bell, did you wish to make that amendment?
I do.
Thank you. And do we have a seconder for that amendment? Trustee Lyra will second that. And the next question is whether this amendment is friendly. If it is not, please speak up. And no one has spoken up, so we will assume that that amendment is friendly. Is there any further debate on the main motion? If not, I will go back then to Trustee Campbell for wrap up.
Not really any required beyond my thanks to staff and the two colleagues for the discussion.
Thank you. So I will ask Manager Guthrie if she could please open the vote on this motion. And we have the result. The motion is carried, 10 in favor, none opposed, no abstentions. Thank you all very much. The next item on our agenda is the appointments to OPSPA. And since we are almost at 9 o'clock, we've been at this for several hours now, I would like to call a 5-minute recess. If people could please turn on their videos so that I can see if we have a quorum back again. I am not seeing a quorum of trustees yet. If you could turn your video on, please, so that we know that people are back.
Quorum now, Madam Chair.
I beg your pardon?
We have quorum now, Madam Chair.
I'm still only counting 6 trustees.
That is quorum, Madam Chair. Now there's 7.
I'm here, trustee chair.
Is 7 is quorum, and we do need 7 for quorum, no matter how many of us are absent. So we have 1, 2. Yes, we do have 7 now. So I would like to call our meeting back to order and move on to item 11.4, the appointments to the Ontario Public School Boards Association. And I would go to the director for introduction of the report on this.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Our key contact is Executive Officer Giroux. So if I could ask Executive Officer, please take us through this report.
Sorry about that. In the spring, we normally appoint trustee reps to the Ontario Public School Boards Association, and we appoint the members, 2 trustees to the board of directors. We appoint 2 alternate trustees, and we appoint the voting delegates for the Eastern Regional meetings. This year, because it's an election year, we make a short appointment. So the appointment is from June 2022 to November 14th, 2022. And then once we have the inaugural meeting, we will make the appointment for the balance of the year. So I think you've all been through this process several times. I'm not sure we need much more information. If we have more nominees than positions, then we are prepared with ballots to hold a vote. And if we have the same number of nominees as positions, then no voting will be required.
Thank you, Ms. Giroux. And just for the information of those who are contemplating putting their names forward, this year the OBSPA annual general meeting is being held in Ottawa in person from the 9th till the 11th of June. The deadline for registering to attend is Friday this week, the 3rd of June. The actual AGM meeting where we would have our voting directors present is scheduled for 1 until 4 p.m. on Friday, the 10th of June, at which the table officers will be elected. And also in that session, votes will be taken on policy resolutions that have been submitted by member boards. The Eastern Regional Council meeting is scheduled for 1 to 2 p.m. on Saturday, the 11th of June. And at that session, a vice chair for Eastern Region Council and the members of various working groups will be chosen to represent the Eastern region. So with that, I will open the floor for nominations, beginning with nominations for the position of director for the period from June until mid-November. Are there any nominations? Trustee Huff?
I would like to nominate Trustee Jenkins.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder for that nomination? Trustee Penny, you will second. Do you accept the nomination, Trustee Jenkins?
Chair Scott, thank you. Trustee Huff, I accept.
And are there any other nominations for the position of director? Or self-nominations, that also works. Trustee Huff?
I was doing the self-nomination thing.
You're doing the self-nomination thing, and do we have a seconder for Trustee Huff? Trustee Blackburn, are you seconding that?
Trustee Jenkins.
Or Trustee Jenkins, are you seconding that?
I can second that, Chair Scott.
Thank you. And I assume that since you self-nominated, you are willing to take up the position if elected. Are there any other nominations for the position of director? Trustee Blackburn.
I'd like to nominate Trustee Penny.
And do we have a seconder for nominating Trustee Penny? Trustee Huff will second that. Trustee Penny, would you accept the nomination?
I'd really like to, Madam Chair, but unfortunately I cannot.
Thank you. Are there any additional nominations? Trustee Blackburn?
Well, if that's the case, then I'd like to self-nominate.
And do we have a seconder for Trustee Blackburn's self-nomination? Trustee Huff will second that. And again, I'm assuming that you will be happy to serve if elected. Are there any further nominations? Trustee Huff?
If Trustee Blackburn is willing to stand for this position, then I'll withdraw my self-nomination, as there are two trustees who are very competent and able to do this. I don't need the extra work if there are two people who are willing to do so.
Thank you, Trustee Huff. So I will ask again if there are any additional nominations for this position. Right now, we have still nominated Trustee Huff or Trustee Jenkins and Trustee Blackburn. Trustee Penny?
I would like to nominate Trustee Scott.
Thank you, Trustee Penny. Is there a seconder for that nomination? Trustee
I'll second that. Yep.
Thank you. And I have to confess, I have never been an OPSPA director before, but I would accept the nomination. So are there any other nominations for the position of director? Trustee Ellis?
I'd like to move to close nominations.
And do we have a seconder for a motion to close nominations? Trustee Huff, are you seconding that? I will call the question then on the motion to close nominations. All those in favor? And those opposed? And the motion to close nominations is carried. So it looks as though we do have an election to conduct. And if staff could please refresh us on the process we are using here.
I'm just asking Manager Guthrie a question. And I'm waiting for her answer just to clarify the process.
Through you, Madam Chair, I have a ballot that will allow for trustees to select up to 2 candidates that I will put in the chat, and trustees will be asked to select from the full list of trustees, the 2 that they wish to have elected.
To clarify, the trustees will be asked to select from the 3 nominees, but the ballot includes the names of all 12 trustees because we didn't know who the nominees would be. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And the submission of ballots is through the chat?
I will put the link to the ballot in the chat. Manager Owens will open a breakout session for you and Superintendent McCoy, and you will direct message the chair.
Perfect, thank you.
So we will have Ms. Giroux and Superintendent McCoy doing the count, and you will then let me know as chair of the result.
That is correct.
Thank you. I think we're ready to go unless there are any questions from trustees about the process here. So we are waiting to see the link to the ballot appear in the chat.
Oh my God.
waiting for the vote results. Still, it's always the hardest part of any of these situations.
Madam Chair, my apologies for the delay. I was having trouble communicating with Superintendent McCoy and just wanted to have someone else witness the results. So I am able to confirm the results. There was no problem with the voting. I just needed another confirmation, and I will type that in the chat to you now.
Thank you. And we do have a result, and the result is that trustees Jenkins and Scott are elected. So thank you to all of you for this, and we will move on then to the election of alternate directors who will serve if one or both of the directors are unable to attend a meeting. So are there nominations for alternate directors? The floor is wide open. Trustee Jenkins?
I'd like to nominate Trustee Blackburn.
And do we have a seconder for that nomination? Trustee Huff will second that. And Trustee Blackburn, do you accept the nomination?
I do not.
Are there any other nominations for alternate director? Trustee Lyra?
I'll self-nominate.
And do we have a seconder for Trustee Lyra's self-nomination? Trustee Ellis, would you second that?
Yep, sure.
Thank you.
And I have my hand up.
Yes.
I'll self-nominate.
And do we have a seconder for Trustee Ellis's self-nomination? Trustee Huff, are you willing to second that?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. And do we have any other nominations or self-nominations for the position of alternate director? Trustee Blackburn.
I move we close the nominations.
And do we have a seconder for closing nominations? Trustee Lyra will second that. So it would appear that we have acclaimed, elected by acclamation, trustees Lyra and Ellis as alternate directors for OPSPA for the coming years. The next one that we need to decide is the position as voting delegate for the Eastern Regional Council meetings. And do we have nominations for that position? Trustee Lyra?
I will nominate Trustee Jenkins.
And is there a seconder for that? Trustee Penny will second. Trustee Jenkins, would you accept the nomination?
Thank you, I accept.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations for voting delegate for Eastern Regional Council? Trustee Lara,
I'll move that we close nominations.
and a seconder for the motion to close nominations. Trustee Penny will second that. And I will call the question on the motion to close nominations. All those in favor? And opposed? And the motion to close nominations is carried. And congratulations, Trustee Jenkins. You are acclaimed as voting delegate for the Eastern Regional Council meetings. And lastly, we have to find ourselves a trustee to serve as the alternate voting delegate for Eastern Regional Council. Trustee, do we have any nominations for that position? Trustee Lyra?
I will nominate Trustee Scott.
And is there a seconder for that nomination? Trustee Huff? And yes, I will accept the nomination. Are there any other nominations for alternate voting delegate? Trustee Lyra?
I will move that we close nominations.
And a seconder for that, Trustee Ellis? I'll call the question then on the motion to close nominations. All those in favor? And opposed? And it would appear that I have been acclaimed as the alternate voting delegate for Eastern Regional Council meetings. Thank you all very much for your support for that. And the last thing I think that we need to do, because we have elected two, we have acclaimed two, we have acclaimed one, and we have acclaimed one more. So someone needs to move the recommendation basically to confirm all of the nominations officially with the correct names in place for all of these positions. Trustee Lyra, are you making that motion?
So moved.
And Trustee Penny, are you seconding that?
So seconded.
So that means this has in the past always been a recorded vote. So I will ask if staff have got all the names in the right places, if they could please open the vote.
Through you, Chair, I cannot see if Trustee Fisher is still in the meeting. Just waiting for his vote.
Let me just check and see whether he is still on the participants list. He is no longer on the participants list.
Thank you.
And so we have a result with 8 in favor, none opposed, and 1 abstention. That concludes that particular business item and brings us to matters for discussion. Report from OPSPA representatives, and I will go to Trustee Penny.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I'm giving this report as, I guess officially I am not, but anyway, we do need to quickly talk about the policy motions, and so that's to give direction to our new OPSPA directors. and I won't belabor the point too much, but there is quite a few of them. And they are attached to a package that Trustee Scott distributed around. Generally, what we've done in the past as OPSPA directors is to seek the opinion of our board on these policy resolutions. Seeing how there is quite a few, maybe we'll just go quickly through them one by one and just to see if there are any objections for us supporting it. And we'll also talk about what the Executive Council recommended, okay? And so the first one, if that's okay with everyone, I'll try to go through them very quickly. The first one talks about maintain virtual meetings for OPSPA. It was raised by the Near North District School Board. And this was not supported by OPSPA for various reasons. I think they felt that it was appropriate to move to a face-to-face type of environment. So I'm just wondering, does anyone object to us not supporting this motion or supporting it? I guess we could have a discussion. So
yes, and I will ask people please to keep their remarks fairly brief if they can. We are at board. We have a number of resolutions to consider here, and the main purpose is to determine whether or not this is something that our board strongly wishes to support or whether we strongly wish not to support it. Trustee Lyra.
I would support the option for virtual meetings for OPSPA. It's a big province, and right now, I don't think the travel allows all members of our board to become an OPSPA representative, because it would mean taking frequent trips out of the city. And so I would encourage the OPSPA representatives to support allowing virtual meetings so that more potential members of our board could be OPSPA representatives.
And just for clarification, the policy resolution would appear.
it does state, Madam Chair, that all meetings be virtual with the exception of the AGM, the Labor Conference, and PES. That is its motion. So.
Yeah, so it would not be an optional thing, but rather would be that all of them except for those three.
When I said optional, I meant like they have chosen a subset that were not to be virtual.
Any other comment on this particular resolution, Trustee Blackburn?
Madam Chair, life is about relationship building, and as somebody who has regularly participated in OPSPA over the years, I don't recall missing in-person meetings, and I can tell you because of that, I am very close to many trustees throughout the province, and that has served this district well because I'm able to reach out to people between our meetings and get information from them. The other thing I have is I don't recall us doing this, going through each resolution in a public board meeting before. Like, am I wrong?
The policy resolutions are in fact public information, and the big question is to make sure that we are not taking votes on any of these, but rather we are having comments so that helps to inform the director who will be casting the vote.
So I guess my question is this a new process that's going to take who knows how much time tonight when people are waiting?
That's why I asked people to be brief in their comments.
But my question is this a new process that we've engaged in? I don't recall doing this before.
We have previously had discussions of policy resolutions. Usually there have not been as many as there are this year.
In a public board meeting. Okay, well, my memory must not be serving me well.
Trustee Campbell?
Thank you. While I appreciate Trustee Lyra's comment, all organizations are grappling with how much you resume in person, how much you stay remote, and there are advantages to remote, no doubt, in terms of increased access by some. And so I do understand that there are two sides to it. My experience with OBSPA in the past, I haven't been active in recent years, indeed has been that a lot of the important dialogue occurs outside and around the meetings. And I would prefer not having mandatory remote meetings. I think that would probably detract from the ability of school boards informally to discuss things between themselves. Thank you.
Trustee Bell?
Chair, is it possible to amend these motions? Because maybe it would be a friendly amendment to provide the option to have it in person and online. And I think we have a strong equity argument that we could put forth for having the ability to have it online, given, for example, single mothers, for example, find it very challenging to leave their families sometimes and participate in these types of meetings. Thanks.
And I will defer to Trustee Penny, but I believe we do not have the opportunity to amend the motions coming forward from other boards, certainly not at this board table, although if there is a potential for amendments, I don't know whether it is possible to make amendments on the floor at the OBSPA AGM. Trustee Penny?
That's the only location where amendments would be tabled. I would like to point out that the Executive Council, OBSPA Executive Council's comments do make reference to exploring hybrid options, which is I think is along the lines of what Trustee Bell is thinking. And I think that is the reasonable compromise that they're going to suggest. So I think that's what's going to move forward with that. So that's the way it's going to go, I think.
And not seeing any more hands on that one. The next one.
And the next one, just go through them very quickly. The next one is our motion with regards to exploring duties and powers of boards. And I would assume that we're supportive of our motion that we put forward. And this is also supported by the Executive Council. So that's good on that one. The next one, well, if there's any discussion on that, Madam Chair.
And I'm not seeing any hands go up.
The next one is also our motion with regards to the Accessibility Ontario Disability Act. And this is also supported by the Executive Council. However, there was some amendments put forward by one of the boards that I think and we have an opportunity to move it with those amendments to gain support for it. And the reason the amendments were put forward was to just clarify some of the responsibilities with regards to who defines some of the things and to make it more easily supportable when we approach the Ministry of Education with it. So as I said, the Executive Council supports that as well, that the accessibility policy resolution.
So any commentary on this one? And I'm not seeing any, and I know that the proposed amendment had previously been circulated to the original mover. So moving on to the next then.
Thanks, and we only got a few more to go. Thank you very much for your patience. The next one is from Blue Water, and that's it's resolved that support recommends student population estimates and professionally projected enrollment data in school size be considered in the funding formula. Use the same planning data that Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing and Ministry of Finance require municipalities to use. And so what Blue Water is suggesting that the funding formula be linked to enrollment estimates coming from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs. And the Executive Council supports this in principle, but has amended language that was submitted back to the Blue Water District School Board. So I think we could recommend that this be supported as well.
Any comment on this one? And I'm not seeing any, so I think we're on to the next.
Thank you very much. And the next one is from Limestone District School Board, our friends down in Kingston. And it talks about be it resolved that OPBSA whole child and student well-being priority recognize the impact of social determinants of health, including stable and affordable housing, food security, poverty, be included in OPSPA's advocacy initiatives. The board of the executive council and the board of directors had also supported this in principle, but wanted to simply change the wording slightly so that it aligns with our strategic objective, OPSPA's strategic objectives. So I think this one is supportable as well.
Any comment on this one? And again, I'm seeing none.
Thank you. And the last one, and this is put forward by the Waterloo Region District School Board, and it states that the be it resolved that OSPA call on the Government of Ontario to announce Indigenous course requirement for graduation modeled after the one announced in BC, and that we request that the requirement be implemented in place for the 24-25 school year. The Executive Council and Board of Directors recommended that that it be referred to the OSPA's Indigenous Trustee Council before and those comments be shared at the AGM. So I think this is one that is going to be a game time decision. And I would recommend that the Board of Directors also consider it that way, because it was not put forward to the Indigenous Trustees Council, and they really need to comment on things that are affecting Indigenous students.
Any comment on this one? And again, I'm not seeing hands go up. And there is actually one more, I believe, Trustee Penny, which was not reviewed by Executive Council, but is intended to be coming forward from the floor at the AGM. Do you have that one as well?
Unfortunately, I do not, Madam Chair. So I guess that will also have to be a game time decision, because I have no knowledge of it.
And this one deals primarily with a number of things in terms of the advocacy work of OPSPA with regard to recognizing environmental determinants of mental health on student achievement and well-being, and also looking at the OPSPA whole child and student well-being and sustainable and equitable education funding priorities, recognize the inequitable impact of climate change on Indigenous peoples, young people, and socially and economically disadvantaged populations, and advocate for local board efforts in addressing these inequity. And the third part relating to, again, to the sustainable and equitable education funding priority, advocate for dedicated carbon neutral capital and renewal funding targeted to reduce school board energy and transportation carbon emissions. And that one will, I expect, be put on the floor at the AGM. And based on some of our previous policy decisions in the OCDSB, I would anticipate that our board would likely support it. Any comment on that one? And I'm not seeing anything further in terms of OPSPA. Trustee Penny?
Nothing, Madam Chair, other than I would like to thank my colleagues for their trust and support of both myself and Christine over the years to be the OPSPA representatives, and we and just that. Thank you very much for your support of us. We really appreciate it. So,
thank you, Trustee Penny. Moving on then to ministry updates. Do we have any new ministry updates, Madam Director?
Through you, Madam Chair, no, we do not tonight.
And moving on, the board work plan is here. We continue to try to get through more of the things to which we had made commitments. And I'm not seeing any hands go up on that. Moving on to matters for information. As far as I'm aware, there is nothing new there. And that brings us then to new business. And I had Trustee Blackburn with an item of new business.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you, my question is to the Director of Education. It was brought to my attention that the OCDSB had invited the Honorable Irwin Kotler to engage with some members of the OCDSB family. For those of you who are listening who don't know who he is an internationally respected peace seeker. He is currently with the United Nations. He is a former Minister of Justice for the country. He is a former Nobel Peace Prize nominee. It is my view that these are the types of people, and it was an honor in my view to even get him here. And I know what the schedules of people of his caliber look like, having worked for several cabinet ministers, and his would be more fulsome for sure. And the Director of Education chose to cancel his speaking with OCDSB members. Can the Director explain to this board, to our staff, and to the community who was very upset why she made this decision?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, I will certainly respond to the question. Certainly the characterization of what has happened, I do think I need to clarify. We as a district and as a staff, we conduct hundreds of sessions of professional learning for our staff over the course of a school year. And most of those sessions are conducted through planning committees, of which this exact situation is one. So to characterize the cancellation, the adjustment, or the postponement of a particular professional learning session that I deliberately and intentionally and unilaterally made that decision is a mischaracterization of the decision. So the decision was taken by the planners. There were 3 sessions that were planned in partnership with the Center for Holocaust Education and Scholarship. It took some work over the course of the spring to get us to the point where we had designed some sessions, and the first and second session had run for the educators who were involved, and there was to be a third. Each session has feedback that comes back from the participants, and so when the third session was to have been planned, there was some miscommunication about how that was going to go, and it had not been decided that there should be a speaker. And in fact, the feedback indicated, and I'm looking at the messaging here that I did receive on this, that it wasn't the right time to introduce a new speaker into the space at this particular time, that in fact what the participants were looking for was consolidation with the facilitator, who has been excellent to date. And as we're looking at the fact that these are educators who are looking to expand their own knowledge, the feeling of the committee was that they wanted to honor that. So there has been, in fact, a third session undertaken to be rolling out in about a week's time, I believe, in continued partnership with this organization. And so we will, the feeling is that excellent work has been undertaken so far, and they want to continue to do that. So it's unusual well, rather I should say it is not unusual to have adjustments in session to professional learning. We partner with all kinds of people. Sometimes it is, it comes to my attention exactly who the folks are depending on what the sessions are, and other times it is the purview of the planning committees that do this staff development. And so we have external folks, we have system folks, we have municipal folks who participate in this professional learning, and sometimes those schedules change based on the feedback that we do receive. So it certainly was not a reaction to the guest, but it was more of a response to the learners who are a part of the learning cycle.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Director, and thank you, Madam Chair, through you. So I'm a bit confused. What I hear you saying is that it was ascertained that members of the Ottawa-Carleton District School Board staff could not, at this juncture, and I'm a bit confused. So he was scheduled to speak.
No, he was.
So where did this this notion that he was scheduled to speak come from? Because I've heard it from many people.
So my understanding is that as the planning unfolded, outside of the discussion with the OCDSB team, an invitation was issued, but it was not a part of the design of the session that had been confirmed. And so when it came to the discussion with the planning group, and again, this is what I've understood to have occurred, it came back to the discussion with the planning group. When the feedback was reviewed, the feeling was that an external, an additional voice at this time was not the appropriate one or an appropriate time to engage in another voice. So the decision was, rather than bringing in a new speaker into the space, was that the feedback indicated a different kind of plan, and it is my understanding that that plan has taken shape, and that this session is planned for a week's time, I believe, but an additional speaker has not been invited. The current speaker, who has been a part of the facilitation in partnership with this organization, is going to continue the facilitation for this last session of this three-part series. So it was not a predetermined and pre-organized speaker for this third session.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Director, and through you, Madam Chair. So what I hear you saying is Mr. Kotler was in fact never invited to speak to
that is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that an invitation was issued, but it was issued on an ad hoc basis, not as a part of a predetermined plan in collaboration with the planning committee.
So what I hear you saying, through you, Madam Chair, so what I hear you saying, and was the invitation accepted?
I don't know.
Okay, that's odd. So what I hear you saying is an invitation was sent out to the Honorable Irwin Kotler. You don't know if it was accepted, but you indicated to him, or probably not him, but to a member of his staff, that the invitation was no longer
no. So
I really apologize, Madam Director, because you're not being clear with the.
Well, I'm going to try again to be clear. If you can indulge me, Chair Scott, I will try again to be very clear. So when it is that we partner with an external partner in arranging for professional learning, usually what happens is that there is a common understanding about setting the agenda. It is my understanding that the organizing committee of OCDSB had not been informed that our partner had an interest in inviting an external person. When we learned of that invitation, we had a discussion that this was not the right time for that invitation to be issued. So it wasn't that OCDSB issued an invitation and withdrew it. based on my understanding of the matter. I will clarify for the trustee that we have these kinds of invitations happen frequently with our partners through a collaborative, usually a collaborative understanding. It does not come through my office because those are hundreds of opportunities, and we charge our committees and our programs and our portfolios with those staff development responsibilities. So there are people that sometimes I become aware of and people that I don't. And so it is not something that is that goes through the director's office. And so that is as plain and as clear as I can get. I am not, again, I am not aware of a withdrawal of any kind of invitation. What I do understand is that the invitation was issued in goodwill and with interest, but it was not done through the OCDSB collaboration, and that because of that, it has been redirected. And to suggest that it will never happen, I won't say that it will never happen, but it was seen to be not appropriate for this particular session at this particular time, based on the feedback of the participants.
And are you able to say what that is? Like why? Like why would people not be able to engage with a former Nobel Peace Prize nominee?
Trustee Blackburn, Trustee Blackburn, I think that you have asked the director a question. The director has clarified what she understands has happened, and I think that that is sufficient, and we'll move on to any other
items. Thank you, Madam Chair. I
business.
disagree with you. I don't think she's been clear at all. And
Trustee Blackburn,
well,
that's enough. Thank you. Are there any other items of new business? And I note in some chat messages from trustees tonight that there is one very important item of new business, and I'm sorry that Trustee Boothby is not here with us tonight to hear it. But on behalf of all of us, I would like to extend a huge thank you to Trustees Penny and Boothby for their unstinting work as OPSPA directors. We will miss the thorough updates. We know that you have done a lot of work to earn the respect of your colleagues at OPSPA, as well as our respect for how well you have represented us there. So thank you very much, Trustee Penny, and in absentia, Trustee Boothby. Are there any other items of new business? Seeing none, we have reached the end of our agenda, and I declare the meeting adjourned. Thank you all very much.